Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, June 6th, 2022. Thankfully, it's not June 6th, 1944, or we'd all be on the edge of our seat. It's D-Day. It's the 78th anniversary of D-Day. And what a great name for a day. D. Okay, fine, sure, why not? That's military-ish code. We'll call everything D-Day. And welcome to the KITM S. It's S time. And this pile of S is brought to you by the letter S. Yeah, it's time for today's show. We commemorate D-Day. It's as good a day as any. It's Friday was Donut Day. This is D-Day. The D begins the word day, on which, we like Passover, we should all consider ourselves to have invaded Normandy on that day. All right, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. It is Monday, that's true, Bill tells me. And Kagro is checking to make sure it's still okay to punch Nazis. Today's the best possible day to punch Nazis, although quite honestly, I think you might want to use some of the other weapons if you're landing on the beaches of Normandy. But if you get up and close, now's your chance. And it's as good a day as any to commemorate the achievement by punching your local Nazi, or if you want, to travel and punch one somewhere else. Help out someone living in another neighborhood who has to deal with them. Okay, Nazis should be hiding their face at all times anyway, and why not? But Donald Trump continues to try to make the world safe for them. Not really certain what motivates him to do that, other than raw power. I'm not sure what he thinks he's going to do with it, other than steal money. But you know, that's about as broad a vision as he has to have to satisfy himself each morning. All right, lots to round up from the weekend. I'm trying to think about what stands out, generally speaking, but Greg Dworkin collecting his rafto stories in case I can't think of anything, but there was certainly plenty going on. Let me see. I put some things away. This week, oh yes, right. This is the week that we're set to start on the January 6th committee's hearings. I think Thursday prime time, sort of like the Friends time slot for those of you who are, how long has it been since that show's been in the air? Like 20 years. Anyway, you get the idea. They used to be sort of like the prime spot of prime time. I don't know if they're starting at 8, 7 Central. Just in case you lost track of which time zones are which. But apparently they've got quite a show to put on. And if the articles in the papers have been, or are any indication of it, it sounds like they're really building to weaving a grand tale that really lays it all on the line. And we'll see. It'll be very interesting to see whether this makes a dent in anything. Just it's very easy to become a cynic in all of this, and you've been right for a long time. I'm hoping this is the turning point, but I don't know, man. Hearings, okay, I'll be glad to see them on the air. This is a very interesting idea to do them for prime time. I'm excited about the prospect because the story is very compelling. To me, of course, to you, to people who pay attention to, are we a democracy? I'm sorry. Are we a republic? Did you say magazine? Did you say clip? I don't know. But you get the idea. To people like you and me, for whom it's important when a president is caught plotting to overthrow the government that he's elected to head, then you want to see these things. You want to see these stories laid out. But then you realize most people have been paying more attention to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Is it Heard? I don't know. I'm going to be really cool. I don't pay any attention to that thing. I don't know. I see it happening all the time. I don't understand what's happening there. Everybody appears to be kind of a rotten person in general in Hollywood, and so this is bad news, and I don't really want to straighten this one out. I'm no fan of either one of them. I'm not sure exactly what makes Amber Heard famous? Is she an actress in her own right? I don't know. That's terrible because she's the victim, apparently, in all of this. Although, apparently, now there's people disputing this. It's garbage. I don't want to pay attention to it. But Donald Trump has been paying attention to that. I don't know if I put it aside, but I did retweet somewhere along the line over the weekend somebody saying... somebody tried to get a word in with him, a reporter asking him about what about all this stuff? I don't know. The January 6th committee is uncovering, or what about the mass shooting? Which one? The one we were all talking about last week, even though there were another 20 in between then and when we ended up the week. And he had very little to say about that, criticizing Biden. Somehow it's his fault, something. But then he wanted to talk about Johnny Depp and this trial. He's just so dumb and uninterested in life. It's really crazy. I mean, some people are interested in the trial, but if you're the former president, all right, well, you get the idea. Also, in terms of anniversaries, it is the 50th anniversary of Watergate, I guess, because it says so in the newspapers. And over the weekend, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein got together again to write for the Washington Post about that. And I thought a very interesting headline. No doubt in Greg's roundup. We'll talk about it a little bit. Woodward and Bernstein thought that Nixon defined corruption, then came Trump. So it's an interesting article about how basically they thought they had seen the worst of the American presidency. Everybody say worst since Watergate, or even worse than Watergate. They love to say that, compare things to Watergate. And I guess they had the front row seat, and it's their conclusion that, Trump was actually quite far worse than that. By the way, I love the illustration by Rebecca Hendon, who apparently I didn't even realize had spent some time as Daily Kos herself as an illustrator, illustrating this piece. And it's Trump and Nixon both trampling over the U.S. flag and leaving their dirty footprints across it. And I was thinking the only note I have on this illustration is that there should have been toilet paper trailing from Donald Trump's shoe. That would have made that perfect for me. But I'm not an illustrator. Who cares if it's perfect for me? All right, Greg Dworkin is here. That's perfect for me because it helps us organize our day. And it's always good to talk to Greg. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Good morning. And so D-Day, H-hour,
Yes.
S-second.
Right.
Kagro in the morning.
Right. All the.
I'm reminded, by the way, that David Dian is now a prominent journalist and editor. Used to post at Daily Kos under the name D-Day.
That's right. True. Lots of people who are prominent used to put. I guess when you get prominent, you leave.
Right. And speaking of Daily Kos, our anniversary comment comes today from one of our posters who was talking in the pundit roundup I put up this morning, Le Mojos, who says on June 6, 1944, I'm telling you this because I love this story and it's the anniversary, my father was being towed in a glider across the English Channel.
Yikes. When
he looked at his watch and saw it was the 6th, and he said to his friend Slicker, who was a wise guy from New Jersey,
hey,
just like you, hey, it's my birthday.
Hey.
And Slicker responded, hey, free trip to France.
Turn around. Yeah, well,
that the greatest generation.
I'll say. Well,
too late.
Good gallows humor. If it. Well, anyway, being a glider. My goodness, what a. I've seen some.
Yeah, good humor.
Movies
Have a nice
about
cream
this.
Sandwich.
Sure. Oh my gosh. Well, anyway, they told the story, which means good ending. I think for the glider.
Well, it ended well for the Antifas.
Yes, that's right. That's just the Antifa super soldiers who invaded Normandy that day.
Right. So, there's a lot going on. I think the major focus here is going to be on the January 6th hearings this week. And by the way, I wrote to the committee and said, please don't do this during the show because it's really hard to watch and talk to David at the same time. And they said, okay, we'll have it Thursday night at 8 p.m.
Perfect. Right.
Just as a favor to David.
Right.
So I won't watch because
I'm no longer watching Friends at Thursday at 8 because that was 25 years ago. So now I'm free.
Okay, good.
All right. How many years was it? Okay, well, it's a very prime time spot. So very excited. January 6th, June 6th. It's just 6 months and a year.
Yeah, so, the Just Security site has this nice, talk about prime time. They have a nice primer for prime time. And they have it in a PDF form. And let me just quickly summarize it for you, because what they do is they talk about the breakdown of how the January 6th committee has approached this. They've divided into 5 teams.
All right.
Right?
Oh, yes.
Like the Olympics. Although maybe you could call it a color war because, everybody has a color. It's the Reds versus the Greens. So the Green team is following the money behind efforts to overturn the election. I'll tell you about the 5-team color-coded teams. You tell me what you're most interested in, and I'll give you an idea of what they're doing.
Oh.
So Green team, following the money behind efforts to overturn the election. The Gold team, efforts by Trump and close associates to pressure federal, state, and local officials to overturn the election. Different teams working on different things. The Blue team, law enforcement and intelligence agency failures. You get that? Blue. Back the blue.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay. Blue team. Right. I got lots of color war songs about Blue team, though. All right.
Right. The Purple team, domestic extremist groups, QAnon, and online misinformation.
Purple.
And the Red team, January 6th rally planners and Stop the Steal.
I guess they like that. Red.
Green team is following the money.
Yes. Right. Purple is the only one I don't
red,
get.
purple, blue, and gold.
Gold.
So which one do you want to know about?
I forget what they're for. But purple.
Well, see, which one do you remember? That'll give you an idea of which one actually piques your interest. Gold is Trump and close associates that pressure federal, state, and local officials.
Okay, right. That's his face color.
Is law enforcement and failures.
Right.
Purple.
That makes sense.
Domestic extremist groups like QAnon. Red. January 6th rally planners and Stop the Steal. Green. Follow the money.
Okay. Well, I don't think there's a real reason why QAnon is purple, but let's hear about them.
Okay, let's hear about the purple team. So what we know, the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys conspired to interfere with the certification of the election.
Mm-hmm.
Trump's December 19th tweet and his other communications mobilized militia groups. White House, like Meadows, and Trump campaign, like Giuliani, discussed plans with Freedom Caucus members to have supporters march to the Capitol.
Yes.
Despite confidential warnings from U.S. intelligence reports and from some rally organizers, it could turn dangerous. Federal District Judge Amit Mehta held that the alleged facts met the elements of civil conspiracy between Trump and the militia group, and that's why the militia group is being prosecuted for that. Meadows sent an email to an individual which said, quote, the National Guard would be present to protect pro-Trump people, end quote. Key figures that advanced baseless election fraud claims in court of the QAnon conspiracy included former Trump National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, Trump-affiliated lawyers Powell and Wood, and all 3 were banned from Twitter for sharing QAnon conspiracy. Figures including Mike Lindell, Phil Waldron, and Ron Watkins, identified by some experts as Q, coordinated to advance false election claims. And what to look for here is whether Trump or Roger Stone communicated with them, whether Trump was personally aware of threats, whether Trump and his associates knowingly or deliberately promoted these conspiracy, and whether Trump, Giuliani, Eastman, and other associates used the riot and occupation to try to further delay the certification, and whether the White House or Trump campaign privately engaged with extremists in far-right online communications like the Donald.win, as they had reportedly done in 2016. So that's what they're going to look for in this particular segment.
All right. So no real reason why it has to be purple.
No, but like pretty substantive stuff, regardless of the color.
Yeah. All right. Well, I get why all the other colors. I was just curious if there was
they're not going to use orange.
I thought that would use that one for Trump.
That's what Daily Kos and No Guns, So.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I thought they were going to use that for Trump, but they made it gold. So gold is kind of what he thought he was painting his face. So that makes sense for him. Money, meh. Yeah, that's important. I don't know. What other ones are
let's do gold.
Fun and interesting for you? Yeah, okay, gold.
This is
purple and gold. That's like the Lakers.
What we know about Trump. Trump, Meadows, and Jeffrey Clark, Vikings. Who's now on Twitter, trying to get people to rally around his Twitterness.
Okay.
I'm now on Twitter. RT and follow me if you want to promote liberty. Okay, so what are you grifting now?
All right.
President Trump, Mark Meadows, and Jeffrey Clark, who was at DOJ, tried to push the Justice Department's leadership to make false public announcements. At least since November 2021, Bill Barr reportedly pushed back. Acting Attorney General Rosen and Acting Attorney General Donahue pushed back.
Yeah.
Trump told DOJ, just say the election was corrupt. Trump with Mark Meadows pressured Georgia officials. That's now an ongoing lawsuit in Georgia with a grand jury. Trump pressured Pence to delay or halt certification of the election. And as we now know, Trump was happy that people were threatening to hang Mike Pence. In 7 states, groups of Republicans signed documents presenting themselves as duly authorized or potential alternate state of electors. The potentials are okay, probably legally, but the ones who said they were duly authorized are in trouble.
Yeah, good.
White House counsel told Meadows, Giuliani, and members of Congress the scheme was not legally sound, and the Justice Department confirmed that it's reviewing these false electors cases.
All right, good.
And prosecutors have reportedly issued subpoenas. What to look for here, Trump, Meadows, Clark, Eastman's knowledge that Trump lost the election, and their knowledge that Pence didn't have the authority, and whether Trump personally was directly involved in the elector scheme. Reaction of state election officials to Trump's efforts, whether they considered the communications inappropriate, see Raffensperger. Intentions of state-level Republicans who signed false elector statements, see Doug Mastriano running for governor of Pennsylvania. So those are all of interest and I think deserve to be highlighted.
I agree.
Again, lots of substantive stuff here with documentation, and that's just the stuff we know. Liz Cheney says there's a bunch of stuff we don't know yet.
Yeah, right. We got time to figure it out, and they have time to. But if you don't, they'll reveal it beginning Thursday at 8, 7 Central.
So let's do the red team. This is January 6th itself.
All right.
We know January 6th rally organizers participated in dozens of meetings with White House staff, including Meadows, as well as some Republican members of Congress. This is where it really gets interesting. Rally organizers were reportedly concerned about the possibility that an unpermitted march planned by Stop the Steal could turn chaotic and lead to violence. Rally organizers, Stop the Steal activists, and militia groups participated in a group chat that included Roger Stone, who coordinated the effort to overturn the election, with Michael Flynn, Ali Alexander, among others. 2 key organizers of the rally, Dustin Stockton and Jennifer Lynn Lawrence, turned over a trove of documents and messages to the committee and testified. A trove of material obtained by ProPublica includes documents, digital communications, and audio recordings of a variety of individuals involved in the broader effort. If you want to show a conspiracy, they had a lot of stuff to work with here.
Yeah,
Trump-affiliated lawyers have been sanctioned by courts, including Giuliani. In an oft-overlooked decision to suspend Giuliani's New York State bar license, the state court said that Giuliani communicated demonstrably false and misleading statements to courts, lawmakers, and the public at large in his capacity as lawyer for Trump. Or as Louis Gohmert would put it, I can't believe it, they're making lying to the FBI and others like an offense. Lie. Yeah. I mean, congressional people can't even lie to these people anymore. What's going on with this country?
Hey! And what's the deal with airline food?
Yeah, what's to look for?
Yeah.
Whether the Stop the Steal activists, militia groups, the White House, and Trump campaign communicated coordinated plans related to the march. The role of other key figures, including Alex Jones, who's still in trouble for the Sandy Hook stuff, where he lost his case and he lost his ability to evade payment via bankruptcy, and now we're still waiting to see how much it's going to cost him. And the possible involvement of others such as Steve Bannon, who is supposedly under investigation by New York State about his scam to steal money to build a wall, because don't forget, in general, Bannon is a grifter, and anything that happens at state level is not subject to a pardon. Whether and to what extent Trump and associates were informed of the potential for violence, including from law enforcement and intelligence agencies. So I guess that reference means, did law enforcement and intelligence agencies inform Trump about the potential for violence, not was the potential for violence going to come from law enforcement and intelligence agencies?
But that's a fair avenue of inquiry.
I hope they look at everything.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so it's a pretty good primer. It's a good idea in terms of setting up what to look for, and hopefully it'll be like the meta-narrative on Thursday night, and then they'll get into the details in the subsequent hearings, of which there'll be at least 8. But that leaves, a summary, 5 hearings for each of the teams, 1 for each of the teams, and then at least 1 or 2 summaries or other things to get to, and then the summary. So that you can see how you get 8 hearings out of that.
All right.
Of course, if it were Benghazi, you'd get 80 gazillion hearings out of that.
Each day. Okay, that's true. It's a very measured approach. Hopefully it, moves the needle. That's all you can hope for.
Well, interesting column from Jennifer Rubin on that. The January 6 hearings, 2 audiences, 5 objectives. The audiences are the general public and the Department of Justice, she says. And but she concludes by saying cynical pundits will proclaim the hearings produce nothing new. Others will intone that it won't change anybody's mind. Committee members should ignore this claptrap, basically from pundits, and tell the complete story. Just identify those engage in criminal activity. And if you do that, you'll fulfill your oath and secure your historical legacy. Just do what you need to do. Do your job.
All right. Don't even worry about your historical legacy. Just
do your job. Just, be Beto O'Rourke in Greg Abbott's face saying, just do your job.
I think that would work. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I think that we should try and do some sort of popular demand for even more hearings if they go well.
Yeah. Well, it's Thursday night, so you'll have a show on Friday.
Yeah. I will.
And you can, if you watch it, you can actually talk about it. And if you don't watch it, you can still talk about it.
But, well, that's easy enough to do. I'll open up Twitter. Everyone else will talk about it. I think I'd like to see this one. This is pretty unusual. And prime time, although that does mean convincing others at home that this is watchable.
7 Central.
Yeah, right. That's true. And if you don't like it, you should go to the Central Time Zone and wait it out. All right. Well, that's good. And lucky you, all of you who are in Central Time Zone who will be able to watch it early evening or
you can watch
it
live stream.
Yeah, I guess you can do that anywhere.
Because C-SPAN, I'm sure, will do it.
Yeah, I would imagine. Nothing else happening at 8.
Okay, so their first failure, I can report.
Oh, good. All right, let's start.
Is that every single piece, article, news story, and their own frickin' website,
yes,
if you go to it, doesn't tell you what time it starts.
You
have to dig for it.
The committee itself?
Yeah, you have to work for it.
What else are they working on?
They should say, like this huge banner.
Yeah, like
Thursday,
TV guys.
8 p.m., here's how you watch.
Exactly. Oh, it should be streaming. It should be in the Hulu things, whatever. Right.
Yeah,
I can't believe they don't have a promo
spend 15 minutes of Google research to figure out when the hell does it start.
Oh, that's not good. All right. Well, they have a few days to get that ready, but I mean, there's examples all around us on how a television show might be promoted at some point.
Right. You go to the media section, and the first thing you do is, here's somebody talking about the January 6th committee in some obscure news report that has little to do with anything.
Oh.
I don't want to know that. It's the media center. Tell me where to watch.
Yeah, about, it's like media. Which one?
Right?
Okay.
And it should be on every single page. It shouldn't matter which one. Well, you didn't hit the right page to go find it. It should be on every page, right at the top.
Yeah, a big red banner, or blue banner if you like, or any of the 5 colors that you chose.
Right, exactly.
All
so fix that, please, committee.
Hello, committee.
Right. I'll I'm grateful you moved the time, but now tell everybody you did. You don't have to say it was because I asked you. Just do it.
Right. All right. Well, that's bad news. But okay. Do you have any other bad news?
There's always bad news.
Okay.
If you're Boris Johnson, there's bad news.
Yeah. Oh, right. There's no confidence in him.
I don't have any confidence in him. Boris Johnson to face confidence vote on Monday. Tory MPs will decide whether to back their leader in a ballot. The Politico write-up suggests he'll probably eke out a win. The Washington Post write-up says he'll probably lose. And The Guardian says, doesn't matter. He's in trouble either way.
Okay.
So, lawbreaker who could win again, the case for and against ousting Boris Johnson. Some of the key arguments, this is The Guardian, being deployed by both sides as spin wars begin ahead of the no confidence vote. Rebel Tories circulated a note giving reasons to dump the prime minister, and by Monday morning, the chief whip, Chris Heaton Harris, had sent round number 10's own note on the case to keep Johnson. These are the key arguments being deployed on either side. Remove him? He broke the law. He has poor leadership. Unpopular with the public, which won't help us win the next election, lack of direction and failure to deal with the cost of living, scattergun right-wing policies, the threat of scandals to come, risk of an early general election. Arguments to keep him, lack of an alternative, which is the weakest possible thing, but sometimes
what
works.
else are you going to do? Oh, wait, I have that.
Well, what the hell is supposed to do, you moron?
That's not what they sound like. But
Civility at it must be from the southern part of England. Civility at a time of war in Europe.
Okay.
He won in 2019. He could win again. A new leadership contest will lead to blue-on-blue civil war, talking about internal Tory politics, and the prospect of a centrist pro-Remain replacement.
Huh.
Oh, my gosh.
Right. I don't know.
UK should rejoin the single market. Why, if Johnson loses...
Which one?
Brexit might be in trouble. Brexit is already in trouble. It's not working. See what's going on in Northern Ireland.
Yeah. They don't sound like
what the hell is supposed to do, you moron?
Sure. That's not Northern Ireland.
Right. Hey, in the 1 minute before the break, since you played that wonderful clip, which I love hearing, let me do this from Politico magazine. Many reporters think Kevin McCarthy's dumb. Why can't they say so? Washington's last taboo, calling somebody stupid.
Is that that's very sad.
It's by Michael Schaefer. Is Kevin McCarthy a great big dummy? It's not a rhetorical question. But what they do is they list all of the things that reporters are allowed to say, rather than the guy's just as dumb as a doornail.
Yeah.
Right? The hints slip in, often as asides. McCarthy is, quote, a golden retriever of a man. Not known for being a policy wonk. These are all quotes. Yeah. Not known for his immersion in policy details. Not known to have a mind for policy. A coastal extrovert of ambiguous ideological portfolio who would far rather talk about personalities than tax code. And not necessarily a policy wonk or political mastermind like his predecessors. His elevation would mean that, quote, even though the fractured House Republican caucus may benefit from McCarthy's networking abilities, others may have to step up to help filter out the details of policy quagmires. No wonder, quote, many believe he lacks the political and tactical gravitas to be a force.
I do. I agree with that.
Right. So granted anonymity, they'll tell you he's like really dumb, but you can't say that.
Oh, well, too late. It's already been said. I've certainly been saying it for a long time. When he missed the point on Ukraine,
vote for the golden retriever of a man.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We continue on after we, we plotted to get rid of Boris Johnson. We figured out that Kevin McCarthy is a dope. I love harping on that because I'm still so upset about how he totally whiffed on an early warning sign on Ukraine. And though it was very funny that he blurted out that Putin pays Trump, but still, especially now with Ukraine, being the issue that it is, and as people look back and think about how horrible that the incident that led to Trump's first impeachment was.
I need you to do me a favor.
On top of all that, in 2016, they came to the Republican leadership, then in charge of the House of Representatives, and said, listen, this is a terrible situation. It's going to get worse. Russia's going absolutely crazy here. You're going to have to do something. You got to help. You're the ones that rally the Western world to causes like this. We need your help with this. And Kevin McCarthy just missed the whole point. I'm glad he blurted out what he blurted out. Everybody else at least understood that it was someone not from Russia, but Ukraine had come to see them. And they were under various misconceptions about what the United States was doing in reaction, but only Kevin McCarthy forgot which country they came from by the end of the conversation. He's not a smart guy.
Right. So we're going to talk about mass shootings a little bit. And there's always a mass shooting to talk about.
Sure.
Since the one that you probably last heard about in Philadelphia.
Yes, over the weekend.
There's been one in New York, one in South Carolina, 3 in Michigan, one in Arizona, and one in Tennessee.
Michigan is really lighting it up, by the way.
Yeah, Grand Rapids, Saginaw, and a Corse.
I believe that'll be the...
Help me with the French pronunciation there.
I don't know, but escargot, I believe. But I think that's Michigan's 5th or 6th since Uvalde.
Let's see.
I'll check it.
What do we got for Texas here? There was the Waco, Texas one. Nope. There was the Houston, Texas one. Nope. You just lose track because there was just so many. El Paso.
They're all over.
There's so many that there's like 20 since Uvalde, so you have to go back and really look.
Yep.
So, Face the Nation, Anthony Salvanto was breaking down the numbers of their latest polls. Kind of interesting. Are mass shootings something we can prevent and stop if we really tried? Or unfortunately have to accept as part of free society?
I'll think.
I mean, the fact that the second one is more than 0 is unfortunate, but unfortunately, the unfortunate number there is 28. Can prevent and stop if we really tried 72. And what gets really interesting is when you do a partisan breakout of that. Mm-hmm. And, when you're talking about what percentage of Republicans think anything, remember, Republicans themselves are a very small part of the electorate. Okay. So when you read that of Republicans, 56% say you can prevent it if you tried, and 44% said, no, it's just something you have to accept. Like people dying from pandemics. Of course, what you can't accept is the wrong person being on the wrong gendered team. And so Ohio's going to have to search everybody's genitals to make sure everything is okay there. But the Democrats say 85% say you can prevent mass shootings if you try, and 15% say you have to accept it. Independents 73-27, Republicans is 56-44, but it's not 44% of all Americans. It's 44% of all Republicans.
And they may not be Americans.
So that's about like 13% of the entire, general public. So Republicans are just like on the wrong side of this, but they're absolutely fanatical about it, and they vote. So if you feel otherwise, you should vote too. And the reason they get to hold sway, even though they are a minority point of view, is because not enough other people who think differently vote. Local elections, school elections, everything.
Well, yes, you need to do that. And, it helps to remind everybody. You know what? This is a small number of people, and maybe that would motivate people to vote. We can outvote them.
Absolutely can outvote them. Usually do.
If there's a small number of them, they might clean their guns and knock some of themselves out of the voting pool too. You never know who's going to help you overcome these guys. But there's 13% to be had out there on the other side.
On May 22nd, CBS asked, should laws covering gun sales be more strict? On May 22nd, the answer was 54% said yes. Now it's 60%. Kept as is, 30% on May 22nd. Now is 28%. And less strict, 16% on May 22nd and 12% now. Again, very close to the 13% of Republicans who think there's nothing you can do about it.
Right. All right. Well, that's a...
Right. Don't forget, the position of the Republican Party, for the most part, is the best way to prevent these things is to arm everybody except black people who go grocery shopping in Buffalo.
Yes. They just have to walk around and...
Nobody said, well, the real solution to this is to arm the people shopping. Nobody said that.
Well,
nobody. Every other situation is, yes, you have to arm the people who got hurt.
Yeah. That's true. That's the one they haven't said that of. That's interesting. Usually they said, I guess if it was a supermarket full of white people, they would have said, you got to be armed when you go to the supermarket.
Oh, the cashiers have to be armed.
Yeah, they should say that. I'm surprised that they haven't. They love their open carry demonstrations doing that. The Texas people with the AR-15s going to Walmart to buy cookies. Sure.
Right. U.S. would be safer if no one or fewer people had guns. 46% of folks believe that. Everybody had guns. 25% believe that. They are the minority opinion. And yes, you can outvote them. Again, it's a reminder.
All right. I will keep it in mind.
Okay, keep that in mind. Former GOP Congressman Will Hurd, and this is why he's a former congressman, it's ridiculous that any attempt to reform laws to keep lethal firearms out of irresponsible hands is met with outrage and stonewalling. And there are some supposedly leaked memos floating around from Republicans saying, just wait it out. And so your job is to not allow them to wait it out. I mean, it's that simple.
All right. And it's easy to keep this in mind. The events will keep it in mind for you.
Yes, because, again, depending upon where you live.
Yeah. Bullets could be flying at all times.
It's good. So I'm going to turn to a slightly different topic here. And, again, it's weird because we, on Mondays, generally have a lot more to summarize. And we do. But somehow, the summaries are always shorter on Mondays than they are every other day. I don't know why.
Hey, you're in the mode of lightning round mode.
Lightning round stuff. So this is a summary of a book by Phil Gorski and Samuel Perry, who are sociologists who I follow on Twitter.
Okay.
And it's a interview of them by Sarah Jones on their new book, The Flag and the Cross, and the headline is White Christian Nationalism is a Fundamental Threat to Democracy.
So, because we have a democracy. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We have a republic. Don't say that. But, all right. Still, when democracy is threatened, we're all threatened somehow.
Right. So here's the basic thesis here. An ideology is on the march. Traces of it are detectable in a racist massacre in Buffalo, Tucker Carlson's monologues, Marjorie Taylor Greene's public comments. Find it again in the right's anti-abortion rhetoric, which poorly disguises demographic anxiety, or in the right's response to the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. The anti-abortion rhetoric, that's where you hear that, you can't have abortions because we need more white babies.
All right. Never mind. Yeah.
Which shows it embracing God and guns with even greater conviction after Uvalde. This ideology has a name, argues sociologist Sam Perry of the University of Oklahoma and Phil Gorski of Yale. Perry and Gorski call it white Christian nationalism, and in their view, it represents a pressing threat to democracy. In The Flag and the Cross, their new book from Oxford University Press, White Christian Nationalists Undergo Careful Scrutiny. Combining research with data analysis, Gorski and Perry argue that white Christian nationalists share a set of common anti-democratic beliefs and principles. These are beliefs that we argue reflect the desire to restore and privilege the myths, values, identity, and authority of a particular ethno-cultural tribe, they write. These beliefs add up to a political vision that privileges the tribe, and they seek to put other tribes in their proper place. So Sarah Jones asked him, why do you think the term white Christian nationalism is so important to use? I think because it identifies one of the deepest and most powerful currents in American political culture, one that's been invisible to most folks outside of that culture, although we do our best to highlight that here on this show and on the Pundit Roundup.
Reading these guys.
Even in a way, to a lot of people inside the culture, because it's water they swim in and air they breathe, so they don't think about it. And, of course, it's also important because it's right now evolving into a deeply anti-democratic ideology, driving most or some of the most radical fringe groups in the U.S. today, including mainstream political candidates in the Republican Party. And I'd throw in there even that guy in Buffalo who doesn't even consider himself religious.
Okay.
And Perry says, I'd say that one element, just from the empirical standpoint, is that quantitative indicators of Christian nationalist ideology operate differently for white Americans than, say, African Americans.
Yes.
When white Americans take our surveys and answer questions about whether the U.S. is a Christian nation, or we don't need a separation of church and state, or that we should advocate Christian values, for them, it's powerfully associated with things like nostalgia and authoritarianism and a certain vision of America's history, that we have a special relationship with God, yada, yada, yada. And the vision we talk about in the book for African Americans who take the same survey, completely something different. Clearly, for African Americans to affirm those kinds of statements about Christian nation, etc., they don't think nostalgically for a better time. They think aspirationally. It seems in the way they respond to other questions, they respond to a lot of what Phil has talked about in a previous book on civil religion, that there is this aspirational component of American civil religion that holds to a understanding of what America's supposed to be. Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, what we could be if we only, followed our better angels, so to speak. Mm-hmm. That's my summary.
All right.
In my writing, and it's not just me, I've used the term Christian right, but it sounds like you're talking about something more specific. And Christian right, they say, is shorthand for people who hold the ideology. But Christian right, I think, is a similar kind of shorthand for a group of people that adheres to the ideology we talk about. The other reason we really use the term white Christian nationalism is that it connects policy preferences that we associate with the Christian right to an underlying narrative that connects these positions. What does supporting the police or opposing mass have to do with being a Christian? Doesn't really make sense if you look at it from Christian ethics, but it does make sense if you think about it in terms of the underlying narrative about white Christian nationalism, the authoritarian part, the libertarian freedom part for people who are white native-born Christian men. Yes. Then, it starts to make more sense.
Right. Well, yes. I mean, they love it because it's, selfish and great for them.
So very good interview. A lot more there. And I said this years ago and have even convinced some of my local friends who looked at me like I was crazy when I said that. How did Donald Trump get elected? Because Barack Obama's black. I used to say that to everything. Oh, how did it? What's this Trump? It's because Barack Obama's black. And now those same people say, you remember when you said that all this stuff happened when, well, you know what? You were right.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, that was the intention of trying to tell Republican leadership about Ukraine early, but they missed it. And you should have been there for that. They should have told you instead of them. All right. Well, this is increasingly important and increasingly on many radar screens. So that's good. That'll help us. It'll play a part in the January 6th hearings as well, I believe.
And, to bring everything full circle. So that's basically my summary for today. Oh, I should mention.
Yes, there's more.
That, there was a note that there was a guy who apparently had in mind that what he should do is to fix things in this country because things were going wrong. He should assassinate people.
All right.
So he shot a judge.
Yes.
But one of the people that was on his assassination list, including Mitch McConnell, by the way,
wow, really?
Was Gretchen Whitmer.
Okay,
people
poor Gretchen.
really want to take out the governor of Michigan. They wanted to kidnap her, even though that trial didn't go well. They wanted to get rid of her. And this guy wanted to knock her off. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, they share hit lists, I think, among these in these circles. But yes, that was really interesting. You know what? I'm glad you brought that one up because I almost forgot about that one. I wanted to make
so much and so little time.
That one crazy thing. Right. So he broke into a judge's house, a former judge, and shot the judge. And I guess they're investigating it, but he seems to be militia connected, this killer. And I guess the suspicion initially is that this judge must have sentenced either him or someone in his militia to prison. And so as a result, you have to go and shoot the judge because civil discourse. You know how it goes. And what I found very interesting is that this is the plot that investigators think they are piecing together, that he has a hit list that makes some... in Crazy World, makes some sense. There's a pattern to the people that he wanted to assassinate, I guess. Grievances was basically it. What I thought was interesting was, and I know the context in which it was offered and that this is sort of a standard thing to do with the press when you got to give a briefing, but I guess the Attorney General of Wisconsin is called upon to make some comments, not only because there was a spectacular murder, but it involved the former judge, and clearly that's a very frightening thing for him to also have this hit list. But what was amazing was he gives the standard response to things, which was, well, okay, so the shooter, the murderer, kills the judge and then apparently shoots himself, but I don't think he's dead. But they recover him, and they're saying, okay, well, there's no danger to the public. is what the standard line of okay, the guy who did this shooting is incapacitated, so we say things like, well, there's no further danger to the public, but the guy was a member of a militia and had a hit list and wanted to kill a whole slew of public officials for either enforcing the law or insulting his weird ideology or whatever it is, and the Attorney General says they have no reason to believe there's an ongoing threat to the public. The list, sir, is actually a great reason to have a belief that there's an ongoing threat to the public. The fact that there's a supposed militia behind the guy and they all have guns and it's a group of people dedicated to assassinating public officials who enforce the law against them is, in fact, a pretty good reason to think there's an ongoing threat to the public. I hope he only meant that in the stupid rote recitation mode, but I really don't know anything about the Attorney General of Wisconsin. He could be anything from that's just what Attorney Generals say when the shooter is down to I actually am pro-militia and I want you to look the other way. I don't know. I don't know what they have in Wisconsin by way of Attorney General. Just want to say, keep an eye on that.
Well, and this is breaking news, kind of summarizes both Michigan and our comment about white Christian nationalism, as well as the mass shootings in one tweet here. Thomas Lekak, who's a history professor, writes, I'm not over the fact that a gun company made a gun named the Crusader, which is stamped Psalm 144:1 on it.
Who's saying this?
Thomas Lekak. I just sent it to you at the very bottom there.
Thank you.
And Psalm 44:1, for those of you not familiar, praise be to the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle. He's my loving God and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield, in whom I take refuge, who subdues people under me. That's the psalm. And the Crusader is stamped Psalm 144:1. It's in such high demand that there's a 12 to 18-month waiting period. And we don't treat it as a call for religious terrorism.
No.
Have you read about a crusade, he says? That name means something.
Yeah.
It's a call to holy war and murder. You may remember, if nothing else, even if you know nothing about the Middle Ages, and all you know is Monty Python and the Holy Grail in terms of any kind of history prior to 1980, that George W. Bush got in trouble for referencing things after 9/11 as a crusade. Yep. He had to walk it back. Bad thing to say.
It is. That carries its own stigma. Peter Manso has written an awful lot about the religious element in this, and also about the fact that that Daniel Defense place that supplied both the Las Vegas murderer and the Uvalde murderer, very small boutique maker of high-end AR-15s that also has a very strong religious undercurrent to their whole philosophy. They view it almost as a ministry, I would say, that it is a godly act to supply people with AR-15s.
Right.
People you're going to be able to talk into.
The Crusader's not made by them. It's made by a company called Spikes Tactical.
Yeah. The point is that there's more than one of these companies that view gun sales as a Christian activity. It's interesting. And so, in addition, if it's not enough that you don't respect the Second Amendment, what part of something blah 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 do you shall not be infringed? Do you not understand? Well, now they'll be claiming, of course, that it's a First Amendment activity involved as well. So
right. So Spikes Tactical on their website says, created a balanced, reliable rifle that would bring an excellent fighting rifle to people of all abilities and resources, the everyman fighting rifle. We named it Crusader and engraved Psalm 144:1 on the lower receiver to hoist the flag of our faith and to make a statement reminding our customers we are with you. The war is here. We have a duty to defend our homeland and our way of life. In case you had any doubt about what they were saying.
Yeah, well, now I don't.
This is the kind of thing that makes, shall we say, recipients of the message in the position to sue.
Yes.
And don't think it can't happen. See Sandy Hook.
Yeah. In fact, I'll continue on with this theme too, because and maybe we'll wait until after the break. But there's a great piece that Greg Sargent put together over, well, maybe I guess just prior to the weekend, last week, I guess, May 31st. How the AR-15 conquered America, as revealed by an industry insider. But just talking about There's been a lot of writing, both by Greg and a couple others lately, that talk about how the AR-15 itself has become sort of fetishized, and how ownership of an AR-15 means something in particular to gun enthusiasts, and this weird Christian undercurrent too in multiple religiously oriented manufacturers putting out, either their whole line or special editions that have Christian iconography and scripture engraved in the guns. But it definitely goes to the problem of the challenge of implementing some sort of gun safety, gun control legislation, that not only do they fall back on traditional gun nut and Second Amendment rhetoric, but they really believe that it's an anti-Christian thing to do because they've made the manufacture and distribution of these guns a Christian activity. Restricting it is anti-Christian, and everyone knows that's a bad thing because of the false fact about the country being a Christian nation. But hey, who cares about truth? We have some guns to sell. There's a lot of that going around these days. I'll say that.
So you have. And okay. So I'm done saying things.
Okay.
And, I'll be back on Wednesday, and we'll summarize what happens. Maybe we'll do a little bit more pre-hearings discussion, or maybe we'll save that for Thursday, but we'll see what happens. In any case, have a nice show, and I'll talk to you Wednesday.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to that on Wednesday. I'm trying to think. There was a couple other things that I definitely wanted to bring up with respect to the gun manufacturers. And I don't know. There's a lot. It's out there. I'll see if discussing some of it reminds me. Maybe what I'll do is we do have a few minutes left before the in the run-up to the break. Maybe now is a good time to begin with some of that gun roundup material. Greg Sargent's piece, like I said, how the AR-15 conquered America as revealed by an industry insider. He is interviewing, who is it? Well, it's very quickly revealed in the discussion. If I just skip down, Ryan, I don't know how he says his name. I was in such a rush to say it. Ryan Busse, B-U-S-S-E. I guess Greg Sargent could direct message us and tell. He's not listening. He's busy. He's writing for the Washington Post. How the guy pronounces his name, but he is a former NRA insider, I think. Let me set it up, even if we don't get very far into it before the break. As the country continues to absorb the horror of the murder of 19 children in Texas, public attention is refocused on the role that the AR-15 style weapons have played in such mass shooting massacres. In addition to the Uvalde killer, and again, good shift in the narrative, changing the use. Greg reminded us, the other Greg, our Greg Dworkin, reminding us, you should be calling him the killer, the murderer, instead of just the shooter. That's what they were doing. They were out killing, not just shooting. In addition to the Uvalde killer, Greg Sargent actually uses the word, the young man who allegedly slaughtered 10 people in Buffalo used one, the AR-15, of course. So did Kyle Rittenhouse, who killed 2 protesters in Wisconsin, for which he got acquitted. And, nobody needs to recount the damage that the AR-15s have done at this point, not for this audience. But behind all these specific horrors lies an even bigger story. How did AR-15, and its variants, I would say, come to occupy such a position of dominance in our culture? By the way, just so everyone knows, Greg got it this way. How did AR-15 variants come to occupy such a position? I just think, there are many variants, XR-15. Oh, now I remember what I was thinking of, right. Anyway, I'll come back to that later. Make a note for myself. But lots of different variants. And how did they come to occupy such a position of dominance in our culture and increasingly our everyday lives in the first place? The rise of AR-15 style weaponry, which is a semi-automatic civilian version of a military weapon, reflects a growing zeal, at least amid a determined minority in some parts of the country, for the introduction of overtly military style equipment into civil society. And you get the basic idea. The basic and most, or I guess I should say least threatening sounding version for this is, well, gun dudes think those things look cool, and it's kind of like related to cosplay. If you're going to have a gun, and these guys are determined to have a gun, you want one that makes you look like an awesome tough guy. And over the weekend, I saw somebody retweeting even a picture of like even one of the least awesome, least tough guys who love to think they're an awesome tough guy around, Sebastian Gorka, who has his dumb new edition Mustang with the Art of War plates and thinks he's a tough guy. And he posed with his own AR-15 and just to add insult to injury, in his Black Guns Matter T-shirt, posting his photo. But everyone loves circulating pictures of themselves with AR-15s. They think it makes them look cool. And it occurred to me that for a bunch of guys who are like furious that anybody would be engaging in, much less using taxpayer dollars to pay for gender affirmation therapy, there's no more widespread gender affirmation therapy in circulation today than Republicans and their AR-15s and the photos that they send around. This is their version of gender affirmation therapy. For people who say they don't believe in it and it's all gobbledygook, there you go. I mean, they might say, well, we're not spending taxpayer dollars on it, but they really are. There are many ways that we could illustrate that they, in fact, are spending taxpayer dollars on it. But anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting. But it's very overt, and that's why I was thinking the variants of the AR-15s. The XR-15 was the variant that they make. That's what they call the variant that's made by Bushmaster. You remember Bushmaster? They were the ones who manufactured the weapons in the hands of the shooter in Newtown. But you remember, and they're in trouble for it. They're actually getting sued and losing. But you remember why? It was this overt gender reference in their infamous ad. They were the ones who had, their ad was just a picture of their tough-looking gun with some tough and gritty-looking type that says, "Get your man card back." Do you remember that? Get your man card. That you, in order to be a man, to affirm your gender identity, you needed to have one of these guns. Don't tell me that Republicans are afraid of gender identity therapy. They engage in it all the time. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. By the way, I checked out just Googled the Attorney General of Wisconsin, a Democrat, Josh Kaul, Kaul. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. So I guess if you're just going off of your basic rubric here, you would say, all right, well, as a Democrat, in all likelihood, he's speaking off the cuff in terms of, okay, the shooter that we were worried about today at this point is neutralized, and so therefore no members of the public ought to fear that he's going to break into their house and murder them. He's not at large and armed and dangerous. But ill-advised, and ill-advised not to take the opportunity to say this particular shooter poses no continuing danger to the public. I would like to assure everyone of that, but the fact that he's affiliated with the militia and has a hit list, the whole point of this guy's existence, right up until the moment that he, I guess, incapacitated himself in the basement of the judge's house, was to be a threat to the public, an ongoing threat to the public. Not necessarily that each one of you would be under assassination threat, but the civil society in which you participate and upon which you depend for everything in life is under threat from this guy and his friends who are apparently on an overt mission to destroy it. If that worries you, well then yeah, there's an ongoing threat to the public. So I guess what we'll say is he's a Democrat, so maybe his ears would be open to an approach that says, understand what you were doing probably, but this is a fantastic opportunity for you to step out front and say, although this particular guy isn't going to be free to shoot anybody anymore because we've got him, and he may die anyway, but even if he recovers, he'll be spending his life in prison for this. You should be aware that, yeah, there's an ongoing threat to democracy, and it's his friends. So I would recommend that. Let me get back to Greg Sargent, though, who, having sent me down the Bushmaster tangent, I can get back to what's going on here. Remember that the rise of the AR-15 and how it became, as it says here, part of the zeal for an introduction of overtly military-style equipment into civil society. It's not just gender affirmation work that it was doing. In that regard, guess where he goes next? Daniel Defense, the company that manufactured the weapons used in Uvalde, has really pushed the envelope. But this reflects a larger trend of radicalization in the industry, argues Ryan Buss, or Bussey, or Busey, perhaps, B-U-S-S-E. I wonder if it's like Gary Busey, but spelled differently. A former firearms executive is Ryan Busey. Anyway, we'll call him Ryan, I guess, so we can avoid making too many errors. But Ryan has carved out a niche arguing from inside knowledge that none of this was an accident. He says it was the result of specific choices made by the industry, combined with cultural shifts that created fertile conditions for this transformation. I'm sort of interested in some of the linked materials here. One about Daniel Defense pushing the envelope. It links to the New York Times article of May 28th. Gun in Texas shooting came from company known for pushing boundaries. That being, of course, Daniel Defense. Anyway, I think we've had a pretty good backgrounder on Daniel Defense already. Peter Manso having informed us about that. So where were we? Yes, Ryan arguing from inside. The gun violence problem, he says, goes far beyond mass shootings and assault-style rifles. Right now, senators are negotiating reforms that would hopefully address both mass shootings and day-to-day gun murders and suicides. That's a big debate point and a fracture point that right-wing gun enthusiasts love also to use, and also leftist contrarians occasionally, to try and splinter things and to say, you're all worried about AR-15s, but most people who are killed in gun violence are killed by handguns. That's true. That's true. And we should like to work on both. It's really not that big of a deal. Anyway, Greg Sargent continues, yet those reforms will be modest and incremental at best. And given that there are hundreds of millions of guns in circulation in the United States, it's extremely sobering to consider how vast and intractable the gun violence problem will likely remain for the foreseeable future. I talked to Ryan Busey, we'll call him, about all these matters. An edited and condensed version of our conversation follows, and it goes like this. Greg Sargent, beginning. Salvador Ramos, the guy we didn't want to name, who shot everybody in Uvalde, was reportedly an enthusiast of the Call of Duty video game. I hope they're going to debunk the video game thing. But they actually take a different angle on the video games. They're not blaming the violence on video games exactly, but one plausible reason for bringing it up. And I'm sure Greg wouldn't have included it in this condensed version of the interview if he didn't think they were getting around to a new and more interesting point. So, the shooter was a big enthusiast of Call of Duty. Can you explain how the gun industry has used video games and other similar tactics to try to boost sales of guns like AR-15 style rifles? Right? Even if it doesn't cause people to become violent, and many people play the game without ever having any thought of actually wreaking that sort of violence and havoc on actual people. Does it, though, but does it basically serve as product placement? They don't put, well, they do, I guess they give them pistols too, but what's the gun that everybody wants to use in the game? It's more military-style rifles. So here's what Ryan has to say about this. 20 years ago, everybody believed the industry was dying. The gun industry, can you believe it? The industry was dying. Every marketing person in the industry looked around with some worry about how to reach new market shares. Probably in the mid to late 2000s, you start to see the rise of first-person shooter games following the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. There was lots of discussion in marketing planning meetings about how you could get your gun model placed in a movie or a video game. Yeah, actual product placement, right? For real. That represented a solution to the problem, which was how do we attract a new market segment away from this graying older market segment that's not growing? There was a young demographic associated with the first-person video games and action movies. So Greg Sargent says, it's interesting that you mentioned the Iraq and Afghanistan wars as galvanizing this new groundswell of interest in this type of weaponry. How important were the wars, the imagery of the wars coming home, the war on terror, and the Islamophobia coursing through all of this to this cultural groundswell? Very important. I think it seeded everything, says Ryan. Prior to about 2010 or 2012, there was never a gun sold, not a single one, sold in the United States commercial market that was desert tan color. This is a really interesting, I hadn't thought about this exactly, but I did notice this, and what an interesting point. But prior to 2010, there weren't such a thing. In the U.S. domestic market, everybody wanted their guns, every other color maybe, but black was the gun of choice, maybe a flashy nickel-plated one for collector types, but there were no desert tan colors. Now, though, a significant percentage of guns sold are desert tan color. Why? Iraq and Afghanistan. He's right. There's no other reason for that. Greg Sargent follows up. The company that manufactured the shooter's weapon, Daniel Defense, is at the leading edge of this kind of aggressive marketing. How widespread is what they do in the overall industry? And Ryan answers, the story of Daniel Defense bursting onto the market is a case study in how the gun industry has radicalized and changed. All of the AR-15s built are pretty much the same gun. About 500 companies now build them. 20 years ago, there was one or two, and they were on the fringe of the commercial market. About 1999, in the Columbine shooting, the NRA set its political course. We're in the culture war business. Then you have wars happening. AR-15s, patriotism, Islamophobia, all of that happening in the culture at the same time. The gun industry became like a badly gerrymandered congressional district. It only had incentive to go one way. Everything pulls it to the right. And Greg says, what's intriguing to me is the intense symbolic importance these AR-15 type guns have taken on. Throughout Blue America, the feeling is intensified that assault-style weapons have no place in civil society. Yet in pro-gun America, that very fact, that is, the fact that Blue America sees it as having no place in civil society, that arouses such and the fact that it arouses such intense opposition, that fact has become almost itself a point of prideful defiance. You get it? It's like flying the Confederate flag, my heritage and blah, blah, blah. No, it's about saying F you to people. Although there was that one guy who was recently on camera, and one of the guys from the Good Liars is like, so do you support or oppose slavery? Figuring the guy would say, well, I oppose slavery, but why do you fly this flag then? Because I think blah, 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 heritage. He would say no comment, and he was given like 5 chances. And the interviewer was like, I'll give you one more chance to say you're opposed to slavery. Do you support or oppose slavery? No comment. Anyway, I see what they mean. It's a middle finger to everybody. You buy an AR-15 or just put an AR-15 sticker on your truck and think, I'm going to own the libs with this. So, yeah. So Greg says, for the right, living in a society that refrains from acting collectively to limit easy accessibility of such firepower has taken on a kind of higher meaning. Ryan says, I live in red America. If I drive through these streets where I am, almost all the vehicles that have the Trump message somewhere on them also have some kind of AR-15 sticker on the back. The people who marched into the Michigan Capitol, had AR-15s. On January 6th, there were the Trump political flags, and there were the come and take it AR-15 flags. That's true. There were an awful lot of those. And by the way, no one has or walks around with T-shirts or flags that say Molon Labe or come and take it. There's a very big motif that I've seen them with come and take it, and there's a star, and then I've seen ones with a cannon, like a literal old school cannon shape on it. I've seen one with an AR-15 shape on it. I've not seen any with a .38 revolver on it or a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. There's no handguns on the come and take it materials. I've noticed that that's the case. So, Greg, then with another question. This weapon has become a kind of symbolic test indicating the type of society we want. What this middle finger says is you can take your civil society and shove it. Ryan says nothing conveys dominance and intimidation like a loaded AR-15. It was designed to be offensive in war. It was designed to take people's lives. So yeah, but marching around armed in one, while they're like, well, and this is an interesting point too. Occasionally you see people say, well, without Second Amendment rights, there's no rights at all. And we've been over this ground where I say, no, I understand why you say that, but philosophically, you got to disagree. There's no such thing as rights that are if they're only enforceable from behind a gun, that's not a right. That's just you doing what you want. That's might becoming right, but it's not rights. It's like the plunder of war. It's what I can make other people do or grant me because I have a gun pointed at them. A right is something that you should be able to vindicate in civil society or in court, which is part of civil society, without violence. It's something that is guaranteed to you, and if it's violated, you have recourse without having to pick up a weapon. That's what rights are. But I understand that you can trample on people's rights and or trample on people's ideas of their rights too. Like if they say, I have the right to fling, I don't know, make up something totally ridiculous, to pour a bowl of hot spaghetti on your face and burn you. Well, it's not really mentioned in the Constitution. I don't see it anywhere. You couldn't possibly have the right to do that. And if you try to do that, I'll try to punch you in the face before you do that. But what if I have an AR-15 trained on you, or my buddy has the AR-15, and I say, I'm going to pour this bowl of hot spaghetti on your face, or we'll shoot you. And people make some sort of, go through some decision process and say, I think I might be able to survive getting hot spaghetti poured on my face, even all the indignity of it. Definitely think I won't survive getting shot point blank by this guy's AR-15. I might opt at this point, if I believe that they're going to let me live, to allow this. And they'll pour the hot spaghetti on your face and then walk away. And dummy number one might very well come away with the impression, if you think, by the way, that, well, all my other rights are guaranteed by this AR-15. Well, you just guaranteed yourself the ability to pour a bowl of hot spaghetti on a guy's face. That must be a constitutional right, after all. The results point to, okay, well, there's a causation problem here. There's all sorts of things you want to examine. But the fact is, you declared the right, and the other guy chose not to oppose your declaration of rights. And the hot spaghetti was poured in the guy's face, and the gun was here, and I have a feeling that the gun had a lot to do with it. Boom. These guns make rights. No, they don't. They don't. And the choices are often a lot worse than the hot spaghetti, by the way. Anyway, I just thought it's kind of interesting that they go and say this. Nothing conveys dominance and intimidation like a loaded AR-15. And by the way, nothing takes you outside of the framework of civil society and its rights more quickly than depending on the conveyance of dominance and intimidation. One of the rights you're supposed to have is to be free of that dominance and intimidation. But we forget that one for some reason. Because I think it was assumed and probably should have been written down explicitly as long as there were enumerating rights in the Constitution. Okay, so Greg continues, you're positioning the cultural mania around the AR-15 as an aberration or a malignancy relative to what surely are millions upon millions of gun owners who have a much healthier attitude toward their hobby. And Ryan says, well, it's how people are using the rifle. It's what the rifle has become. That's kind of what it's for. That's a very interesting message. I think the authoritarian forces in this country view the AR-15 as a central organizing symbol. Greg says, you often see advocacy for the AR-15 from the same right-wing influencers. Tucker Carlson, Donald Trump Jr., Representative Murdery, Trader Green, etc., who regularly traffic in versions of the Great Replacement theory, or relentlessly fearmonger about leftist terrorism driving the country into civil collapse. Why is it that those who traffic in apocalyptic fantasies about demographic doom also tend to treat the AR-15 as something with almost mythical, symbolic importance? Ryan answers, the idea of civil war or race war with heavily armed citizen patriots as your warriors is hardly under the surface anymore. I won't go so far as to say they actually want people to die in a race war. Well, we can all say that. It's a political tool for them. They think they can use it to motivate and make people angry and fearful and hateful. Greg says, let's talk about the assault weapons ban of 1994, which lapsed in 2004. What fundamentally changed after the ban lapsed? Well, the social stigma of AR-15s was removed. Then, 13 months after, George W. Bush signed the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. It essentially says no firearms company or retailer can be sued for the unlawful actions of a consumer using the product, even if they market it irresponsibly. Get your man card back. Kill everybody at school. Even if you say that in your ad, and then someone buys it and kills everybody at school, you can't be sued for that. Now, the Daniel Defenses of the world stand back and basically say, we've got 500 competitors, so we need to be really edgy in our marketing. They just passed this law where we're not even held to account if we market in ways that seem egregious. And the course was set. And then the lawnmowers came. I'm glad they're doing this right outside the window just now. Greg asks next, gun manufacturers could market this stuff directly to a whole generation of people who were, or he observes, I guess, who were living in a society transformed by the Iraq and Afghan wars. Ryan responds, then, as it got ever more competitive, they'd get the guns into video games, get the guns into movies, call the guns ever more offensive names. There's an AR-15 out there somebody sells called the Urban Super Sniper. How much more suggestive can you get than that? It's linked here. Let's take a look at the Urban Super Sniper. Ooh, and it's so tough looking, and it's got rails and silencer looking barrel, and it may or may not be a flash suppressing barrel, I can't tell, and a scope and the bipod and all sorts of tactical garbage. Urban Super Sniper by, I guess, Wild, is that right? WYLDE, from WilsonCombat.com. That's the name of the company that makes it. Wilson Combat, because that says hunting and target shooting to me. Combat. All right. Continuing on with after the Urban Super Sniper, Greg says, what does an actual policy response commensurate with the problem look like? Are we doomed to being a heavily armed society for the foreseeable future? Ryan says, Rittenhouse, Buffalo, Uvalde, these things are warnings of what's to come. You can't put 450 million guns into a complex society with lots of mental illnesses, if that's to blame for any of this stuff, and COVID-19 shutdowns, and angst, and Donald Trump, and insurrections, and not think you're going to have this. I don't believe there's a way to solve the crisis. We have to start making decisions that make it marginally better instead of marginally worse. That kid in Uvalde, if we'd had a 21-year-old buying requirement for the rifles in Texas, might the kid have gotten a rifle? He could have, but it would have been harder. Why don't we have policies that make it more difficult instead of continuing to make it easier? We still have cigarettes, we still have lung cancer, we still have chain smoking, but we have less now. We made decisions to make things marginally better. We could do that with guns. And Greg wraps it up saying, it sounds like our best hope is to incrementally mitigate a situation that appears to be headed for absolute catastrophe. Finally, Ryan says, yes, and I think we are. headed for that absolute catastrophe. So great. Look out for that. But good warning and some good insight into what's going on and how another part, in addition to a Christian-focused fetishization of arms sales in general, but the AR-15 in particular, along with the cultural or more general fetishization of it, and the desire to bring the cool-looking, awesome tactical weaponry of Iraq and Afghanistan back to the streets of the United States, and probably has a lot to do also with the people, the service members returning from Iraq and Afghanistan, and of course, I assume that as part of the military training, you come to have a certain feeling of safety and security when you're on patrol in the military, walking behind your weapon. And, thankfully everything else that goes with it, and the body armor and the air support and the artillery and the, everything that goes with. But I'm sure there's a certain feeling of, okay, well, when I have that rifle in my hand, I mean, it's always dangerous and nothing's going to save me from a bombing attack, but this is my personal safety device. And you get traumatized over there and maybe come back with some post-traumatic stress disorder. And, from what you read about this stuff, you learn, okay, well, you come back with PTSD, you feel kind of out of place and insecure and jumpy, frightened, etc. And for X number of months or years that you've been in Iraq or Afghanistan or both, the only feeling of security you ever had was with one of those rifles on you. Like a security blanket, you go and get one of those things. How can I get my hands on one of those things? The one I had was military. I had to turn it in when I left. But can I get something pretty much the same? And I guess for some, it's nothing more than that security blanket. And hopefully they never have any either feelings about acting out or any resulting or lingering trauma that puts them, I don't know, that makes them out of their normal operating mode and hallucinatory or whatever the feeling might be like. It might be interesting to, I feel a lot less on edge when I've got one of these things with me, even though I have no intention of using it on anybody. But then it's often a small and fast step from that to, okay, well, maybe I will. And there's obviously no way to tell the difference between somebody who's stabilized somehow by the presence of their AR-15 and someone who is destabilized by the presence of their AR-15. They both look pretty much the same. I wonder how much of it might be related to that. And maybe the desert tan thing, some of it is cosplay, some of it is this is what mine looked like. I want one that looks like it, not just feels like it. That's kind of interesting. I hadn't really given that much thought to that. But then, put that together with the PTSD, and it's not great. All right, let's see. There was the information about the shooter in Wisconsin. A couple updates that might be of some interest. Actually, maybe I'll just pass for now, but since Greg kind of covered it, the guy had a hit list, and that's kind of worrisome in its own right. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Why don't we jump over... almost up against our break again. So we'll start planning for our last segment. And I am thinking that we might do well to read through that Woodward and Bernstein piece. Let me add something that I think is going to be, I hope, relatively short. Judd Legum had an interesting thread this morning. Threads are never that short, but this is interesting. The NRA, he's taking the NRA to task here, saying that its School Shield program, whatever that might be, and we should read a little bit about it, it's probably in his article, makes it they like to say, America's leading charitable organization helping to protect our children, which is not really what people think of when they think of the NRA. But they, I guess, are part of, and Lindsey Graham is signing on, and maybe even Chris Murphy signaling some interest in this idea of using military veterans and whatever, anybody who wants to volunteer, and training people up to guard at the schools. We've talked about how much that would cost, what a bad idea that is for a number of reasons. And of course, between that and arming teachers, I reminded everybody over the weekend, that's why I started Gun Fail. Again, for those who might have forgotten, is it a good idea to put a gun in every classroom? Well, consider how often guns find themselves being fired for no particular reason or with no intent, no mental intent anyway, of firing them at all. But yet it happens and they go off, and when they go off, bad things happen. Now, of course, when they go off, people fire them, but whatever. Anyway, between that and then I think the NRA at that point said, well, we have the Eddie Eagle program to teach kids not to accidentally fire guns or mishandle them. Now they have the School Shield program. We're on the side of protecting our kids. We'll give guns to veterans, etc., etc. Well, Judd had some interesting information I'll share with you on the other side of the break about how serious they really are about this thing. And guess what? Yeah, that's right. They're not. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. All right, let's jump back to what Judd Legum had to say here. He was examining the relative seriousness of the NRA in saying that, you can't blame us for all of this, and we're actually trying to help protect children. We already have a program called School Shield, and guess what? It doesn't really do anything. Maybe the best thing to do would be I could read through his written narrative on it in his popular information newsletter, popular.info. The NRA talks big on school safety, but spends very little. All right, so rather than read the tweet thread, we'll read the narrative here. The 2022 NRA convention was, of course, held just 3 days after the school shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, that left 19 students and 2 teachers dead. In his address to attendees, NRA CEO Wayne LaPierre described the organization as a champion of school safety. We need to protect our schools, LaPierre said, because our children, our most treasured and precious resource, and they are our precious, and they deserve safety and protection. That's why the NRA launched our School Shield program to help promote and fund the necessary security that every school child needs and deserves. We'll see what their idea of that protection is. There's an embedded tweet from the NRA, I guess with that clip available here. The School Shield program was launched by the NRA almost a decade ago. So, they've been kind of aware of the school shooting problem. After 20 students and 6 adults were murdered in a mass shooting at, Sandy Hook Elementary School. Today, the NRA website says the School Shield program makes the NRA America's leading charitable organization helping to protect our children. According to the website, NRA School Shield, with a little registered trademark there, is committed to generating the funding necessary to sustain a consistent and accessible source of financial support made available to schools across America. Is that gobbledygook? What does that say again? NRA School Shield is committed to generating the funding necessary to do what? To sustain a consistent and accessible source of financial support. We're going to generate the funding necessary to sustain a source of financial support that will be made available to schools across America. Okay, so basically they're saying they're going to give money to schools to do a thing with. They don't actually, nowhere in this does it say what they're going to do with the money. It just says that they're going to make money available. And I don't know, I guess the name of the program is supposed to mean, oh, okay, we get what you mean. You're going to put armed guards in there. But we don't know whether this is money for training, this is money for hiring, this is money for equipping, this is money for putting out placards that say help wanted. I don't know. It's pretty unclear. But again, note for the record that this is something that they started, as he says, almost a decade ago. So for 10 years, the NRA has acknowledged that school shootings are enough of a problem that they need to be seen to do something about it. And their suggestion has been funding armed guards at schools. And yet 10 years later, when there's a school shooting, all the Republicans who are in the NRA say, we need armed guards at schools. And it would have been interesting pushback at the time to say, the NRA says that they have a program called School Shield to do this stuff, and you're a big supporter of the NRA. And what do you make of the fact that they've been working on this for 10 years and your immediate solution is still, hey, we need armed guards? Well, that's kind of what Judd is getting at in this piece. NRA financial documents leaked to The Reload, a conservative publication that focuses on firearms issues, tell a very different story. The documents reveal that in the first 8 months of 2021, the NRA, which had total revenues of $282 million last year, spent just $13,900 on School Shield. So that's really something, right? What did they say they were going to do? They're America's leading charitable organization helping to protect our children, and that they're committed to generating the funding necessary to sustain a consistent and accessible source of financial support made available to schools across America. $13,900 out of the $282 million that they brought in. The NRA estimated that less than $20,000 would be spent on the program for all of 2021. In other words, the NRA spent about 0.007% of its 2021 revenue on school safety issues. To put that level of spending into perspective, LaPierre spent $39,000 on designer suits during one visit to Xenia. Is it Zegna? Xenia? I don't know. I'm not fancy enough to be able to figure that out. In Beverly Hills, and billed that to the NRA. So they spent half of what he spent on his suits, they spent on School Shield because a precious resource, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, between 2004 and 2017, LaPierre spent $274,695.03 at Xenia, according to correspondence released during a legal dispute with the NRA's former ad agency. The NRA defended the expense to the Wall Street Journal, saying LaPierre's clothing expenses were justified due to his many public appearances. That doesn't really mean anything. I mean, he has to look sharp on TV. Yeah, well, then let him pay. It's his image. Let him pay for it. They pay him plenty of money. LaPierre could afford to purchase his own clothes. In 2019, the latest data available, LaPierre was paid more than $1.8 million by the NRA, which is a tax-exempt nonprofit organization, by the way. The grants to schools themselves are handled through a related organization, the NRA Foundation, and a look at the tax filings by the NRA Foundation paints a similar picture. Between 2013 and 2017, the NRA Foundation reported just 3 grants under the School Shield program. 3. 4 years, 3 grants, totaling less than $200,000. All 3 grants were made in 2014. Hasn't been anything since, I guess. In between 2013 and 2017. They only granted money in 2014 for some reason. In 2018, the NRA Foundation reported 20 grants. They stepped it up a little bit. 20 out of the 130,000 schools. 20 grants totaling $384,179. That was a reflection, according to a lawsuit, of former NRA President Oliver North's insistence that School Shield become a, quote, real program. Soon thereafter, North was ousted from the organization, by the way. North's efforts, however, was still modest. There are more than 130,000 K through 12 schools in the United States. 20 of them, though. 20. In 2019, the most recent year available, the NRA Foundation distributed tens of millions of dollars, but reported no grants under the School Shield program. The NRA Foundation did report dozens of grants to schools to support competitive shooting programs, but none to protect them. Since 2019, the grant section of the School Shield website has displayed this message. Again, since 2019. Our recent grant application is now closed, according to the Wayback Machine, basically. They don't even display that webpage anymore. Let's see. Next up here, a lawsuit alleges that School Shield was a fundraising front. A Texas lawsuit filed by Ackerman McQueen, the NRA's former ad agency, alleges that School Shield was a shell program that LaPierre deployed to boost fundraising. Ackerman McQueen argues that the purpose of School Shield was to increase revenue, and the NRA never had any intention of or meaningful ability to execute competently anyway. In March, on the eve of trial, the NRA and Ackerman McQueen settled their claims and counterclaims for an undisclosed sum. The settlement avoided a trial where the facts about School Shield and other aspects of the NRA's activities would have been publicly disclosed. The paltry funding for School Shield is a reflection of the NRA's hollow commitment to the safety of K through 12 students, but the policies underlying School Shield are also deeply flawed. I mean, I think we've discussed that here, just doing the math of it. The primary recommendation of the School Shield program is to place more armed law enforcement officers at schools. But mass shootings at Uvalde, Columbine, and Virginia Tech all took place despite the presence of armed officers on campus. Critics of the program also note that placing armed officers at every school would, quote, increase juvenile contact with the criminal justice system and, quote, increase the potential for injuries and deaths from firearms. Yes. Other recommendations of the School Shield program are dystopian. The NRA recommends that schools eliminate trees near buildings. Why? To prevent roof and upper level window access to school property. Any trees that remain should be trimmed to permit cross-campus visibility. Schools should also avoid dense vegetation close to buildings, as it may screen various forms of illicit activity. Instead, schools should plant thorn-bearing and sharp-leaved plant species to create natural physical barriers to deter aggressors. The report also recommends hardening our campuses by installing ballistic protective glass, creating a single point of entry with entrapment areas. Other countries have campuses with trees and regular glass windows, but did not repeatedly have mass shootings at schools. These countries, however, have far fewer guns. While the NRA is spending very little money on the School Shield program, its recommendations are extremely influential politically. After any school shooting, Republican members of Congress repeat the recommendations of School Shield as an alternative to any proposal limiting access to guns. After Uvalde, Senator Ted Cruz went on Fox News and recommended having one door into and out of the school and have armed police officers at that door. He repeated those recommendations a few days later at the NRA convention. The proposal is completely unworkable, since many schools have thousands of children, teachers, and staff who could take hours to funnel in and out of a single entrance every day. Other schools have multiple buildings with children and staff often moving among them. In 2019, after another major school shooting at the Santa Fe High School, Texas passed a new law that allowed districts to harden schools from external threats. Schools, however, didn't receive enough state money to make the types of physical improvements that lawmakers are touting. Uvalde's school district received $69,000 from a state grant to enhance physical security in January of 2020. That investment and the presence of numerous armed officers did not prevent last month's shooting. More broadly, there's no evidence that beefing up security in schools has prevented any violence. And by the way, a lot of times money like that, I've reminded you the past couple of weeks, a lot of times that money went to things like locks for the doors on the classrooms, which ended up, in this case, I mean, it's still a good idea generally, but ended up in this case prolonging the crisis and costing a lot of kids their lives, because the thing we installed to keep people out ended up keeping cops out. Oh well. Nevertheless, the NRA's position continues to dominate among Republicans in Congress, because any package addressing gun violence would need the support of at least 10 Senate Republicans. The chances of any meaningful reform are certainly slim. But there you have it. And that doesn't even get into the math of how much would this cost and how paltry are the numbers from the NRA in terms of what contribution they would be making towards putting armed guards, even at 1/10 of the schools in America. They would never be able to afford that. All right. Let's see. We got a few different directions that we probably could go in all this, and so many different things to add to this. We'll use the rest of the week to talk about, I guess, the upcoming January 6th committee hearings. Let me go to the Woodward and Bernstein piece, because it's A, long, and B, kind of necessary to get through, and good launching pad for some commentary. We're not going to make it, I don't think, all the way through before the end of the show, but it's as good a thing as any to go out with here. Woodward and Bernstein thought Nixon defined corruption, and then came Trump. The two of them writing this piece together. It gets a little awkward. They talk about themselves in the third person, but that's what you have to do. President George Washington. Remember that guy? Do you remember him? He was very... Okay, anyway. In his celebrated 1796 farewell address, cautioned that American democracy was fragile. Cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, he warned. Two of his successors, Richard Nixon and Donald Trump, demonstrate the shocking genius. It wasn't that shocking. Okay, but okay. Of our first president's foresight. As reporters, we had studied Nixon and written about him for nearly half a century, during which we believed with great conviction that never again would America have a president who would trample the national interest and undermine democracy through the audacious pursuit of personal and political self-interest. And then along came Trump. Never again. So much for that phrase. I really found this article pretty interesting, and I hope we get to the part about there were so many huge crimes, of course, wrapped up in Watergate that I missed some of the petty ones. Even 50 years of discussion of them, I was surprised to hear about the dirty tricks squad and the levels to which they would go. Anyway, the heart of Nixon's criminality was his successful subversion of the electoral process, the most fundamental element of American democracy. Sounds familiar. He accomplished it through a massive campaign of political espionage, sabotage, and disinformation that enabled him to literally determine who his opponent would be in the presidential election of 1972. With a covert budget of just $250,000, a team of undercover Nixon operatives derailed the presidential campaign of Senator Edmund Muskie of Maine, the Democrats' most electable candidate, is how he's described here. Nixon then ran against Senator George McGovern, a South Dakota Democrat, widely viewed as the much weaker candidate, and won in a historic landslide with 61% of the vote, carrying 49 states. Over the next 2 years, Nixon's illegal conduct was gradually exposed by the news media, the Senate Watergate Committee, special prosecutors, a House impeachment investigation, and finally by the Supreme Court. In a unanimous decision, the court ordered Nixon to turn over his secret tape recordings, which doomed his presidency. These instruments of American democracy finally stopped Nixon dead in his tracks, forcing the only resignation of a president in American history. Donald Trump not only sought to destroy the electoral system through false claims of voter fraud and unprecedented public intimidation of state elections officials, but he also then attempted to prevent the peaceful transfer of power to his duly elected successor for the first time in American history. Trump's diabolical instincts exploited a weakness in the law. In a highly unusual and specific manner, the Electoral Count Act of 1887 says that at 1 p.m. on January 6, following a presidential election, the House and Senate will meet in a joint session. The President of the Senate, in this case Vice President Mike Pence, will preside. The electoral votes from the 50 states and the District of Columbia will then be opened and counted. This singular moment in American democracy is the only official declaration and certification of who won the presidential election. In a deception that exceeded even Nixon's imagination, Trump and a group of lawyers, loyalists, and White House aides devised the strategy to bombard the country with false assertions that the 2020 election was rigged and that Trump had really won. They zeroed in on the January 6th session as the opportunity to overturn the election's result. Leading up to that crucial date, Trump's lawyers circulated memos with manufactured claims of voter fraud, that had counted the dead underage citizens, prisoners, and out-of-state residents. We watched in utter dismay as Trump persistently claimed that he was really the winner. "We won," he said in a speech on January 6th at the Ellipse. "We won in a landslide. This was a landslide." He publicly and relentlessly pressured Pence to make him the victor on January 6th. On that day, driven by Trump's rhetoric and his obvious approval, a mob descended on the Capitol and, in a stunning act of collective violence, broke through doors and windows and ransacked the House chamber where the electoral votes were to be counted. The mob then went in search of Pence to prevent the certification of Joe Biden's victory. Trump did nothing to restrain them. In fact, many people say he encouraged it. By legal definition, this is clearly sedition. Conduct, speech, or organizing that incites people to rebel against the governing authority of the state. Thus, Trump became the first seditious president in our history. 50 years earlier, Nixon was intent on undermining and subverting the American system of free elections, the keystone that holds our democracy together. In 1971, Howard Hunt, a former CIA operative, and G. Gordon Liddy, a former FBI agent, were hired to work for the White House in a special investigations unit, then known as the Plumbers. Their initial mission, to plug leaks from the Nixon administration. Plumbers, get it? To plug leaks from the Nixon administration officials to the news media. One of the most notorious undertakings the Nixon Plumbers was the burglary of the psychiatrist for Daniel Ellsberg, who had leaked the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times and Washington Post. Hunt and Liddy ran the burglary. The hope, unfulfilled, was to find dirt on Ellsberg or show that he had communist ties. With the onset of the campaign, Hunt and Liddy were moved to the Nixon Re-Election Committee to quarterback spying and sabotage operations. Memos discovered during the Watergate investigations identified Muskie as Target A, with the goal to visit upon him some political wounds that will not only reduce his chances for nomination, but damage him as a candidate should he be nominated. In one of the strongest and most effective espionage efforts, Elmer Wyatt, a Nixon campaign operative, was planted in Muskie's campaign, where he became the senator's chauffeur. Wyatt was paid $1,000 a month to deliver copies of sensitive documents that he transported between Muskie's Senate office and his presidential campaign headquarters. It was a spectacular yield. The volume was so great that Wyatt, codenamed Ruby I or Ruby 1, I'm not sure whether that's supposed to be a Roman numeral or not, rented an apartment midway between the two offices, equipped with photocopying machines. Very extensive operation. Copies of Muskie's documents were ferried to the Nixon re-election headquarters, where campaign manager John Mitchell, the former attorney general, took advantage of the almost total visibility the documents provided into the Muskie campaign. Itineraries, internal memoranda, drafts of speeches, and position papers, according to the Senate Watergate Committee's final report in 1974. The Nixon campaign also received papers on campaign strategy, debates, fundraising, personnel, media operations, and internal disputes. Meanwhile, Gordon Strachan, I don't know, it's Strachan, the top political aide to White House Chief of Staff H.R. Bob Haldeman, and Dwight Chapin, Nixon's appointments secretary, who was like a son to the president, hired Donald Segretti, an old college friend and former Army lawyer, to implement sabotage efforts. This is the part, I don't think I heard about this stuff. Segretti, in turn, hired 22 individuals to inflict these political wounds and was paid $77,000 in cash and checks. Herbert Kalmbach, Nixon's personal lawyer, secretly made the payments from leftover campaign funds. In March of 1972, one Segretti operative circulated a counterfeit letter on Muskie's stationery with allegations of sexual improprieties involving rival Democratic candidates Henry Scoop Jackson and Hubert Humphrey. The letterhead cost only $20 to reproduce, but Chapin told Segretti that the $20 was a sensational investment and had obtained $10,000 to $20,000 worth of benefit for the president's re-election campaign, according to the Senate Watergate Committee report. Over the months of the Democratic primary race, this is, I guess, more specifically the stuff I didn't know about. The heckling, pickets, and M-U-S-K-I-E spells loser signs trailed Muskie. Segretti and his operatives stole shoes left by the candidate and his staff outside hotel room doors for polishing before campaign events. Keys were surreptitiously snatched from campaign motorcades while the drivers stepped away for a smoke. Shoes and keys then were deposited in dumpsters outside town, making it impossible for the campaign to stay on schedule and function smoothly. Segretti's operatives reported, "We did grandly piss off his staff and rattled him considerably." I mean, compared to the rest of the Watergate burglary stuff, I guess it's easy to let that stuff slip through the cracks, but wow. I'm sure those of you who lived through the investigation and were politically aware remember all of it, but wow, I don't know. I spent so much time on the other stuff, I didn't get that. Stealing shoes. Come on. Muskie and his staffers were spooked. At a rally in New Hampshire, standing on the back of a truck, the candidate expressed how upset he was by published slurs on his wife, Jane. A gossipy editorial published by conservative William Lobin in the Manchester Union Leader, headlined "Big Daddy's Jane," had suggested that the senator's wife drank, smoked, and liked to tell dirty jokes. I guess we could get over that these days. The story was also published in Newsweek. Around the same time, Muskie had appeared to condone the use of the word Canuck, a derogatory term for Canadians, though our friends use them too, right? Canuckistani, in a forged letter drafted by a Nixon White House aide. Just outright forgeries. Under assault, Muskie openly cried at the New Hampshire campaign stop. David Broder, the Washington Post senior political reporter, wrote a front-page story that Muskie broke down 3 times with tears streaming down his face. Drip by drip, all this added up to the implosion of the Muskie candidacy. And later, Muskie said, "Our campaign was constantly plagued by leaks and disruptions and fabrications, but we could never pinpoint who was doing it." Now we know, of course. There were many players in the Watergate drama. Nixon's chief of staff, Haldeman, wrote in his 1978 book, The Ends of Power, and behind them all lurks the ever-present shadow of the President of the United States. Haldeman added, "This tendency to strike too hard reflected a belief in and too great a willingness to accept the concept that the end justifies the means. In other words, Nixon believed that his political survival was a greater good worth subverting the will of the people. A man is not finished when he is defeated. He is finished when he quits," Nixon wrote in a note to himself in 1969. It was a classically Nixonian adage embraced by Trump, who had been defeated in the 2020 election, but armed with falsehoods and a scheme to hold on to power, refused to quit. Even before the election, Trump relentlessly tried to maneuver and claim that the electoral process was rigged against him, laying the groundwork for an assault on the legitimacy of its outcome, which he continues to this day. In June 22nd, 2020, for example, nearly 5 months before Election Day, he tweeted, in all caps, "Millions of mail-in ballots will be printed by foreign countries and others. It will be the scandal of our times." At 2:30 p.m. on November 4th, as the presidential vote count solidified Biden's path to victory in the Electoral College, Trump told the nation and the world, "This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election." 3 days later, the Associated Press and the rest of the media declared Biden the victor. Trump, however, said, "We all know why Joe Biden is rushing to falsely pose as the winner." That was my plan, right? "And why his media allies are trying so hard to help him. They don't want the truth to be exposed. The simple fact is this election is far from over. Our campaign will start prosecuting our case in court. I will not rest until the American people have the honest vote count they deserve and that democracy demands. Sounds like someone might have written that last one for him. Anyway, time for us to wrap it up and get out of here and leave the rest, I guess, to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I don't know how much time he's going to be spending on this particular article, but I recommend it to you. There's a lot more. Well, I don't think we even made it halfway through this, but it was very interesting to put it in the context of Watergate, to reveal some additional aspects of Watergate with which I was not familiar, but they do a great job comparing Trump to going way beyond anything that Nixon even did. And Nixon, for the longest time, was the gold standard of American presidential corruption. It's very interesting. Again, I recommend it to you. But if you don't have time for that, or you want to hear more about some other things, of course, stay tuned here to Netroots Radio. That will satisfy the urge, because the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is coming up next. Justice has the following on tap for you. Let's see. From Bill Clinton through Obama and until this very day, the GOP, as we like to call it, put the P in petty payback and probes. Students of color push back on calls for more police in schools. Abortion rights advocates say they need more men's voices on their side. And a New Orleans Starbucks store is the first in Louisiana to vote union. That's a nice change. There is, of course, international stories on the menu as well. Let me share one of those with you after this.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Well, look at this. We got NATO kicking off a nearly 2-week Baltic Sea naval exercise with Finland and Sweden newly joined or ready to join. And Australia charged China for threatening one of its maritime planes over the South China Sea. News from all over the world. Stay tuned. Next.